joining us today, Jimmy Whatley. Appreciate you coming in. Law of the land.
Oh my goodness, let's don't break it, okay?
Coming into trading and stuff like that, there are people who trade the news. They're watching every little moment of something that's happening and stuff like that. And I didn't realize that. I was like, that's crazy. Why would somebody trade, that? But I didn't realize the effects behind it until I saw what happened with the coal, right? So Obama comes in and Hillary Clinton comes in and says, we're going to take all your coal jobs.
All of it.
And, sometimes we just think people are saying things artificially, or what really would that mean? I've got a job, I got a mine, coal's going good. What are you talking about? But then the inverse effect of that was in 2011, we had a high, and the commodity prices basically dropped 50% all the way down by 2016 because they put regulation on coal. And I thought, man, I can't believe that just by that regulation, it would drop the price down this much. But it had a worse effect on companies because like you see here in 2016, coal went back all the way back up to the highs. But now when we come over and we start looking at the real behind the scenes effects of companies, 2011, it was at the high here. It never came back up. So based on commodity prices, this should be back at $42. But for the company, they basically went from $42 down to $4 and ended up, this company here had to close out and start a new IPO because they lost so many market shares. And that's the effect that I want to talk about today is how laws affect the businesses behind those laws and regulations.
Well, we can sure talk about it. And one of the things I'll say about coal is the law that was put into place did drive the cost of using coal up. And they regulated it out of existence. But the real killer to the coal market is natural gas. Because what happened is the price of natural gas came down, abundant supply, and our folks that use most of the coal, people that use most of the coal are the power producers. They're the Alabama Power, Georgia Power, Southern Company. And they went from using almost 80% coal to some significant portion of that has gone away. Most of it has gone away. And the reason is it's cleaner. Natural gas is cleaner, less cost to run it through and generate power. And the other thing is cheaper. So even when you could get to that premium coal up in the north and you could transport it, it still was overall more cost effective for the power companies to use natural gas. And that's the killer. Right now, if you look at what Obama did, he blocked the use of natural gas too because it's terrible. In his mind, any fossil fuel is terrible. But he wanted the Russians to put a pipeline into Germany and to the Europeans. And right now, that pipeline is going to cut our throat unless we can get it stopped. There's a bill trying to stop it right now. I heard it yesterday. They're going to say that if you as a contractor work on that pipeline and it's close to being through, if you put it down, then we're going to shoot you in the head if you try to do business in the United States again. But right now, the liquefied natural gas, the ports are being open. We're beginning to ship it, and we can actually supply Europe with our abundance of natural gas cheaper than they can get coal. And we don't think our partners should depend on Russia. So the law that you're talking about, we've changed the law now to make it more better to produce natural gas. That's a southern way to put it.
Well, there was one thing that my father-in-law told me that you know well is he said with carbon dioxide and you being in the agricultural business for so many years, he said what we missed is that carbon dioxide actually made the crops yield better and grow more and stuff like that. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, it's the truth. You look at crop plants, when the amount of carbon dioxide in the air goes up, their efficiency goes up. You're getting a 3 to 5% increase in production simply because of the increased carbon dioxide in the air right now. And that's real, but nobody wants to recognize that. The other thing that's real It's when you go back and look at the ice samples and look at the concentration of carbon dioxide in those little bubbles in ice samples from thousands of years ago, we're still way below some of the maximum levels of carbon dioxide. Our environment does change, and there's no question that carbon dioxide content in the air has gone up in the last 40, 50 years. But it's also been a whole lot higher in earlier, and people don't want to recognize that.
So I didn't even realize that, the natural gas production coming on strong, because I have a friend who worked for a natural gas company, and like 10 years ago, we were talking about the stock market, and I said, man, listen, if they're going to match every dollar you put in the max amount of money that you can afford that they'll match, because then you automatically make 100% with your company, and then basically that will go up over. And sure enough, Georgia Power bought his gas company out a couple years ago, and he says almost every employee became millionaires overnight. Yeah. And I said, see the power of investing. And so I didn't have the foresight to think about the natural gas because of the laws changing, just in general conversation, to invest. But it was a real miracle for him. I mean, basically, he paid off his house. He bought another house. I mean, he was set, and he was, making $20 an hour type guy, and so
that's great for him.
It was neat to see, right?
But socialism is a lot better than that. You know that,
right? Because you're going to get a $250 check for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to a brain surgeon in Cuba, and he said, like, socialism, basically everybody gets paid the same, and he said one day they said, hey, take this machete and go outside and whack the weeds in the yard, and he's like, I can't do that, I'm a brain surgeon, I need these. And he's like, well, we're all equal, we're all the same. And he's like, they couldn't even see his value of a brain surgeon that they would give him a massage. I mean, that's so degrading, and I don't think we realize how degrading socialism is. Nobody can rise to the top. Nobody can achieve greatness or desires to achieve greatness. So, definitely
no
a system
incentive
we're not
at all.
for.
No incentive.
So definitely we don't want that law to be implemented into our land, for sure.
That's for sure.
Because of the devastation of it. If we're looking at the devastation that happened with the coal industry, but, one thing went down, but then natural gas went up. So, I mean, there is this ebb and flow of, would natural gas ever have taken the higher, sales and price and, conquering the industry if they didn't put that regulation on coal. So I think good and bad in all situations, we just have to figure out, how does the good affect us? How does the bad affect us?
You've got to be able to forecast. That's the key in any business, the forecasting of what will occur. Irregardless, it's an environmental assumption. You say, I have an assumption in my business 10 years ago that coal is going to be shot in the head and natural gas is going to be the source. If you were running the supply for Southern Company, you'd need to make that assumption. Then you'd make a plan associated with that assumption. How can I avoid getting caught in that trap? And the way you do it is you shut down coal plants or convert them to natural gas. You get your long-term supply arrangements lined up and try to lock in long-term supplies of liquid natural gas or natural gas in a pipeline. It's not rocket science. It's thinking ahead and looking beyond the end of your nose in business.
Well, one of the things I'm looking at just now with that market is driving around here, you see all of these solar farms. And to me, it's interesting because you're like, oh my gosh, look, these huge solar farms. But if I look at break it down, now me as an energy consumer, I could provide my own solar farm at my house instead, because it's kind of like if the goose is good for the gander, right? If Georgia Power sees that they can use solar power to source me power, why then can I not use solar power to source my own power?
You can, but you can't sell it back to them.
I can't sell it back. Right. So I can't make money on it. But we're talking about industries, huge factories. I mean, I know a building that of that they're paying $4,000 a month on electric, and they're only using the building minimal amounts of time. So power is expensive.
Power is expensive. Standby power is expensive. And the reality is you can install solar, but the efficiency of it without government subsidy still doesn't compete with what you get when you plug it in the wall from Georgia Power.
So back to the law of the land. Basically, that subsidy that the government's giving Georgia Power is helping them be able to build it. So solar's not efficient enough for smaller businesses or maybe personal household industry to invest in it yet.
If the government, when I bought a farm 25 years ago, I had a couple of partners, and we went in and cut timber, and then I said, we're going to replant this, and the government will pay 80% of our cost of replanting it in longleaf pine. And one of them looked at me and said, that's crazy. I said, no, that's not crazy. Crazy would be, since we paid the money in taxes, not letting the government do a stupid thing like pay us to plant, because we're going to plant it anyhow. But the reality is, if the government's stupid enough to pay for a subsidy on solar, then you might as well take advantage of it if it works for you.
That's a great point. Yeah, there's so many things that we don't realize that, the government will give us back, and it takes us the time and look for those opportunities. And how does the law of the land affect us? Both good, both bad. Cutting out coal, fine. What do I need to do to change over to natural gas? What do I need for the subsidies that they're letting us have for solar? All great points. I was sitting there and I was thinking about just the world, the production of oil. And I didn't realize that in the turn of the century, 1900, Russia was the number one. U.S. was behind Russia. But, it's funny because if you look over the last century of oil production, you see so many changes. Like you see Russia go to USSR, then back to Russia. And, they see them cut down to 50% oil production, then go back up to, 1 or 2. And like even here, when we're looking at it, Saudi Arabia isn't even on this screen.
No.
They actually don't even come on until, I think, about 1940. And, yeah, see, this is 1938. They're not there. 1940, they're at the bottom of it. And we don't realize, like we're looking now and we see Saudi Arabia and they have this, paradise. They're building their own islands. There's just money on top of money. They have tigers for pets and stuff like that. But that was less than 100 years ago. They weren't even on the oil production market. And I thought, what was the law of the land that changed that? And really in 1945 is when the petrodollar came out. And from that point, 1945, Saudi Arabia is still just down here at the bottom. And then now they're up at the top. Within 10 years, they're in the top 5.
And they did it because of investment of U.S. companies predominantly locating and putting it in production. And it's a good oil. I mean, it's a quality oil field, biggest, not the biggest now, but it was the biggest at its time.
Well, and that was funny because, like Trump's even touting, he says, we are right now the biggest, and it is true. And, 2018 came along. We were for sure and are right now top. And then Saudi Arabia second, Russia third, and then Canada. But that's so great to see because Trump's basically saying, I'm releasing all this regulation, and so oil should be, staying cheap for us, for a long time.
When you look at what makes manufacturing work, you got to have energy. And energy predominantly is either fuel or it's electricity. And you got to run trucks. So far, we run trucks in this country and it delivers goods all over. You got to have this kind of infrastructure. So he's saying, look, you're going to use the natural resources we've got. And we've got 600 years worth of natural gas in the ground. I don't know we don't know yet how many people, Jimmy Carter, we're going to run out of gas. We're going to run out of fuel. All you got to do is give some incentive and let folks go to looking for it.
Another thing about the law of the land in just recent years, we've kind of seen the effects on factories from the, WTO and the TPP and, basically saying that in the last years, 60,000 factories have closed down because of those laws of making those agreements with all these world companies and trade and stuff like that. Have you seen that, since you've been around for the last decade?
Well, what happens is that business people make business decisions. And so when the law of the land changes so that you could go to Mexico, instead of paying $30 an hour to build a car, you can pay $5 an hour, and you ship it in the States without any restrictions, guess what I'm going to do? As a businessman, you're going to say, what can I do to make my company the most money long term? And you move in that direction. Now, you got to have some you're going to have some politics problems. But the reality is these big companies, they pay the incentive to the CEOs and the boards to get return for the shareholder. And if return for the shareholder is set up by the government, the law of the land, I remember Ross Perot saying, this deal we're cutting is going to be the great sucking sound of jobs leaving North America going to Mexico. And he wasn't a prophet, but he was right. He was a businessman. He understood what motivates folks. No politician until Trump has been elected understood business. And you go up there and start talking to folks about how do businesses make decisions, they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue. Other than somebody blows in the air and says, I need this or I need that, here's $100,000, here's $100,000. It is, they don't have a clue how do you stimulate and move a complete country in the right direction through stimulating and removing regulations and focusing on those things that drive it.
Well, Jacuzzi, they did about half of their production was coming from China. And then because of all the tariffs and everything like that, they looked into where else can we go. And one of their considerations was Mexico. And for them to build and produce and do all of the, mechanics behind the assembly line and all of that, it was cheaper. They would make a profit in 1 year moving their facility to Mexico. And then they would have a closer source because of the shipping's closer. Sure. Basically they can go right up the middle through Texas and service all those areas and then, do the distributing over here. And I thought it was so interesting that people are quickly adjusting their company to see where the positive is because of the effects of the law. And we know the tariffs are going to stop. At some point in time, the tariffs are going to stop. They're not going to be here for, 20 years.
What's happened in China, I've got two companies that I'm part owner of that we're starting companies, and we're sourcing some part of each one of those products in China. And we have moved everything we could out of China because of the disruption that takes place in that. But our suppliers are saying they're losing 60% of their customers. And what's happening is if you become and China's finally realizing this, that's why they're coming in and getting some deals done. When you become a supplier that you can't depend on, undependable supplier, folks leave. I mean, they make like a tree and leave, and they go somewhere else. They'll go to Vietnam or somewhere else in that area, or Mexico. So it's business. You make that decision.
Stock market's open. Well, and speaking of the stock market, over the last 100 years, there's kind of been this ebb and flow of 17 years up, 17 down, 17 up, 17 down. And, we see it, the uprise and the fall of like the Great Depression and all. And the interesting thing to me is right now you are been 17 years sideways. And after being 17 years sideways, there should be a positive up 17 years. And every business person you talk to, they're overwhelmed. They need more employees. They're busting at the seams. They're needing bigger buildings. They're needing bigger distributors, or they're trying to redistribute how they distribute their products. And everybody's taking a look and saying, "What do I do?" It's like their hair's on fire in a good way. Go ahead.
I was going to say it goes back to how do you make most money. And when you make an investment long term, you're looking at how do you get return on average net assets employed. And when you spend capital, that's an employed asset. When you hire people, that's something you can fire. You can't shut that plant down or sell it immediately. You got to look at it in that way. And so even though we have incentives, what's happening is if that business person thinks, lo and behold, we're going to get us Elizabeth Warren elected, and I'm not trying to preach politics. I'm just trying to give an example. there's a lot of people say, well, there's no need in spending money if she's going to make us do these kind of things and put these restrictions on us. So people make decisions based on their forecast of what's best for their company long term.
Let's talk about, you have mentioned before where you saw Carter was coming in and he was, talking about the interest rate going up, and in your company you were, doing millions and millions. And was that the time that you started, shipping around the world, or kind of what was that time?
That was right in the time when we we were looking at expanding in the U.S. and then starting into parts of the global business.
So you get a president coming in, he's talking about the times, and basically you're trying to increase, and he's saying no, and getting ready to shoot up the interest rates.
And so interest rates going up out of sight, it made better managers out of us, because what we did is we had a member of our board, outside board. You got to have some of those kind of folks come in, and he gave a picture of forecast of what would happen in interest rates over time. And there are people in the insurance business out there that have money invested, and they need to invest it long term. So he suggested we go to them, we borrow money we didn't need at a very low interest rate for a long period of time, because he said if you're going to grow like this, you're going to need money. And we did. We went out and took a loan that was at a low interest rate at the time. And when it was 19% on the market, we were getting one at 9% because we had locked it in over a long period of time. And we also then started managing our assets, our inventory, our receivables. You would buy from a foreign supplier and get 120-day terms. You bring it in, turn it around, create a product, sell it, and get your money in 30 days. So we ended up growing our business during that period of time with no negative cash flow. And because we planned on it that way.
Well, now just take in mind that if this possibility forecasts the market for the next 17 years to be just a boom market, from 49 to 66, that increase period was 650% in the stock market. From 82 to 2000 was almost 1,200% increase in that 17-year time span. So, if you take the next 17 years and you go by the bottom one, they potentially could go up 600%, or you take the top, average 1,200%, or you take the middle at about 800%. Either way, the market is on fire. What would you recommend that companies do? I mean, interest rates are low right now. Go borrow money now. I mean, are you fear of the next 17 years, the interest rate changing, going higher in such a great economy? What are kind of your thoughts on forecasting?
A lot depends on what you can get in terms of long-term interest rates too. I mean, I prefer growth through profits. You make $100. I like to see a person invest wisely up to 50% of that in the future. And the future could be in R&D, it could be in capital investments, things like that. And I like to see folks with that. I like to see a company that's going to take some money and make money. I mean, I don't mind giving money back to the shareholders. I think people that, other than growth in the value of the stock, you also can pay some dividends. It says to your shareholders, yeah, you're going to participate with us as we go along, because people like to see a little bit along and along. And we got companies in 3 to 6% dividend going forward. Those are pretty good companies. They say, I got enough cash flow. And let's face it, if you have changes in any of the environmental issues, cash flow is how you can measure how well that company is managing.
Well, what do you think about investing back into the people? I mean, right now we kind of have this potential law of the land that will raise the minimum wage up to $15. And I don't know if the whole country or just, certain states or, but potentially, I think, $7, $8, wherever the minimum wage is too low. I personally think that, I mean, I don't pay anybody that because I don't know how you can live on that, and we live in a pretty cheap state,
We do.
As far as housing and energy and all that. We live in a pretty cheap state. Forget, New York, there's no way, but my question is like, all right, you just said you don't mind giving back to the shareholders. What kind of thought should we have as business owners to give back into the employees, the heart of the business?
Employees are the critical part. But in your business, you don't hire anybody right out of high school. You don't hire any inexperienced people. If you go up to $15 an hour, what kind of return would you get on that if somebody doesn't know how to even open the door or show up on time?
Right.
I mean, that's just how many people actually make $7.50 an hour. I don't know. I haven't studied that, but I do know that if you're worth your salt and you can be productive, then you're going to be competing for a job with somebody else. And if another company over there is paying 15 and they got good people, and if you want to pay 7.5 and looking for good people, guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to pay 15. Right. And that person's got to be productive so you can make money at $15 an hour. So it is one of these things. The government will tell us nobody is worth $7.50. There are some people that aren't worth $7.50 because they're going to cost you.
Right.
But not everybody's worth $15.
Right.
Each town, cost of living, all of those kind of things. Let the market work it out. I have not studied it, but I would bet you that in Valdosta, Georgia, where we live, not that higher percentage of people are stuck at $7.50.
Well, I know a girl about 20 years old. She's been working at Chick-fil-A for about a year now, and she's up to about $13. So fast food industry, they've raised her up pretty quick. Do you know
why they paid her that much?
No, tell me.
She shows up every day. She meets people with a smile on her face. She lives by the way Chick-fil-A wants you to live in that business. She has customer service, and she makes them a lot more than 13-something an hour.
Right.
So that's why they pay her.
Right.
If she didn't, they'd let her see the highway.
True, 100%. Well, it's funny because like right now I pay my guys, I know for a fact, more than another guy. And the other guy can't get his jobs completed because he's not paying enough. And I'm taking all of his work. I'm getting tons of work. Now I'm making smaller profits than him, but I have less headaches. We're getting the jobs done faster, and like for me, that was something I was like, well, I used to be the guy who's like, I got to get over on everybody to try to make mine. Like I was like, I got to take your money so I can make money. And I didn't realize I had problems like all the time. And once I started increasing the value of the people doing the jobs, less and less problems came about. But now I see the effect with the market being so tight. We travel,
Yeah.
So I mean, there has to be an element for travel and thought, and you got hotels and expenses, you got everything that, and this guy's done market share, had this whole company, did 30 projects for this whole company, but now consistently I've had to finish the last 3 projects for him. And I know it's based off of what he pays people. Nobody new will come to his company because he's not paying enough. And so I'm not going to tell him that, obviously I like taking his market share, but I can see the direct effect between him not paying enough and us paying enough or more than they should,
It's a decision you have to make, and it is a decision that each company says, because competition will get you good people. If you don't pay and look at what people could make if they left you and pay in the 75 to 80% range of that norm, you won't keep good people. Right. You got to create an environment, a culture, so people feel appreciated and can be productive. And you appreciate them, and you pay them well, and you give them something so they can be proud of what they're doing. It's all a blended issue, and pay is just one part of it. It's critical, but people like to be recognized. They like to be appreciated. They like to be given a challenge. All of those things work.
Well, and all of this stems from the potential of the law of the land changing to a $15 an hour rate. Just forecasting potentially if it did, or where the market would go, or stuff like that, just trying to get ahead of potential problems. Are there any other problems or things that you see that could come up for businesses within the next couple of years of, it seems like Trump's been helping by reducing the regulations and stuff like that. One of the big things that he did was taxes. He reformed taxes. My brother-in-law, who was a lawyer, said he was paying almost 50% in taxes per year. And he's like, if it goes up 55, 60, he's like, I'm probably going to quit, and start farming. And And I was like, wow, I can't believe he's paying that much. And but now, I mean, Trump reduced down the taxes. He's even talking about reducing down the capital gains tax and stuff like that. So are there any negative things you see, or what are the positive things that you're seeing right now?
The lawyers, they don't get the tax break that small business gets. I mean, what Trump did is he gave an LLC a chance to cut the rates down, but on LLPs, which is mainly what lawyers do, he didn't give that opportunity. I think the biggest concern we got to look at is what's going to happen in this next election, and it's right down to, do you want to continue what we're doing? And I'm not trying to preach politics today, but it's had a major impact on what's between the ears of a businessman and how they make decisions. That's the biggest thing I can see, is if we get one of the well, let's call it Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders as elected, this country will change overnight. The attitude, the confidence of the business people will be going to zero. And the people, it goes back years ago, it said that when 50% of the people in the United States can vote to get more from the other 50% of the people, this country's over. And that's part of where we are. If you could say, okay, we're going to tax everybody, if you took every dollar from those people making over $100,000 over that, and you put it in the tax coffers, you couldn't pay for some of the programs that Elizabeth Warren wants to make. It's I don't know. I don't call it stupid, because those are smart people, but I think it's poor judgment. That'd be where I'd come from.
Yeah, it's interesting, because not only do you have to manage your business, but then you have to also manage what people are saying they want to do. How do you manage Hillary Clinton saying we're going to shut down every coal mine? You have to manage the thoughts of the potential forecasting based on what people want to do. And yeah, I mean, with what Elizabeth Warren is saying, it could be pretty tremendous against us in taxes and like you said, change overnight. What good things are you seeing right now forecasting for the future?
I think one of the real bright spots still continues to be the energy. Energy, especially liquid natural gas. They've got to get some ports open where you get liquefied natural gas, where it can just go to Europe cost effectively. We got to decide, are we going to ship it to China? Right now, China is the biggest polluter in the world. They keep building coal-fired production units over there, and we can compete with those if you put any value at all on the quality of air. And when you go to breathing some of the stuff they got over there, you put value on that. I think energy is one of those sectors. The other one is services. We are more innovative here in delivering services and innovation than any country I know of, other than Israel. Israel's got some, they're not very big, but buddy, they have a footprint into the innovative world.
Oh, yeah.
And you get to, if you want to find some technology that'll snap your head back, so, whoa, go over and sit down and talk to some of those big head, little neck folks over there. They know what they're doing in a lot of these areas.
Yeah. Well, John always says that negotiating with, those people they're one of the toughest in the world, Let me
John is right, by the way.
Yeah. He said, man, it is hard.
When you got Moses negotiating with God, come on.
He's learned a thing or two.
He learned a thing or two, yeah.
You're talking about energy, so just thinking about bringing it back up, Bill Gates started a breakthrough energy venture fund, something like that, with 20 different billionaires. And I think it's so interesting that he's talking about something new, on the horizon. He's putting out money for people to bring ideas and things like that. And the greatest thing about Bill Gates doing it is what did he understand about Microsoft, right? All right, take the product, and then how do you distribute it? And he distributed out Microsoft all over the world. And so he's the exact right person to bring a new energy, new idea, new concept, and not fluff. I even love his thought on nuclear, where he gets to burn 95% of it and then reburn that last 5%, and using all waste instead of having, the tremendous amounts of nuclear waste that we have.
Well, it's not a tremendous amount. When you put it in terms of that picture, there are ways to reuse that. But there are also people whose hair's on fire that if you mention the word nuclear, you can't deal with it. To me, if you put in an application for a nuclear plant. It takes 15 years to get the plans approved. Wow. Then it takes forever to get a site approved, and then forever to build it, and you're always going to spend more. If the government would say, okay, I've got a plan here that's approved. We're going to approve this one. And you could build that over and over and over again, take 15 years off the cycle. Then you start looking at how you've got environmental safety built into it. You should be able to put that where you want to put it, close to the people that need the energy. And it's basically, it's other than the cost of capital, it doesn't cost hardly anything to produce energy out of nuclear. We ought not to throw it out the window. Bill Gates, one of the things about Bill Gates is he always understood customers, and Bill Gates understood what the power of the innovation he had was. And then the other thing he did was he put some leverage on it. He really did. He was accused of a lot of things, but the boy was tough. So I hope that coming out of that kind of investment, we'll find some energy sources that we've never even thought about.
Yeah, I'm excited for the future. I mean, I think with the possibility of 5G, being able to use that technology and interfacing it with our cars, our house, our cellular, having what Elon Musk is doing with the satellites, having a constellation above us where, we're constantly being able to have, service even over the ocean, I mean, when we're out on a boat fishing or something, I mean, there is no service out there, so to be able to have a constellation that you have a constant satellite over your head, and not only for that, but think about for the world. I mean, there's parts all over the world that don't have towers or service or stuff like that. So I think it'll definitely bring a new life to the whole world, basically waking up with connectivity. And that's one of the things like with Bill Gates is he is trying to heal people through some of the, like polio and different things like that. And he's like, man, one of the biggest things that's the problem is waste, human waste and energy, He's like, if we can accomplish these things and, power helps, solve those problems. And so I'm excited for the future because people are thinking how to increase the future, and how to help, not because of the law of the land, but how to help because they want to.
Because you love people, You look at one of the real problems in Africa is clean water. And nothing says you can't go out and drill a well for people, and that increases health right overnight. The other thing is that people don't realize, but you've got mosquitoes, malaria-carrying mosquitoes that are still devastating areas of Africa and in Central America. So there are ways to solve that problem, and yet people are adverse to saving people's lives because you use a little DDT. That compound has saved more lives than any organic compound in the course of time. It's just amazing how you can save lives with a little something like that. It's shocking to people, but you have a choice. Do I put DDT out to kill this Anopheles mosquito and eliminate in this area 20% of the people dying from malaria? Or do I say, no, we're going to let them die? No, that's a crazy choice. Now, you can do some other things. You can put permethrins on nets and things like that. But the reality is you have to look at human life and decide what you want to save.
And you know about all this because basically you're in the agriculture business.
I was in the pesticide business, and I know a little bit about it.
You know a little bit about it.
I know a little bit about it.
And I thank you so much for coming in and kind of talking about these issues that have happened over the last century, and because of laws and regulations. And
because I'm over 100 years old. Is that what you're trying to do?
If there's anybody who knows it, you know it, Jimmy. Thank you so much for coming in. Final words?
My pleasure. Good to be with you, Ben.
Until next time.